I believe the bedrock of any successful civilization starts and ends with religion. And I believe very recently, perhaps in the last 10 or 20 years, we have knocked the foundation out of modern Western culture. Nobody believes in God anymore. There's so many goddamn atheists, and there is a steep slope from atheism to nihilism, and nihilism to the most soul-crushing depression you will ever experience in your life. I promise you that. I'm on record saying many, many times that I was the hardest atheist you would have ever met if you met me when I was in my early 20s. I thought I had everything figured out. Naive. Naive and arrogant as we all are at that kind of stage in life. I wanted to share with you Hinduism, the Hinduism pill, what I believe is a path to realizing God. Now, this will not be for everybody. So if you are of a disposition to be watching TikTok videos, and why have you got TikTok on your phone, by the way? Cut that shit out immediately. It will destroy your neurochemistry. You can go after those videos on Instagram and all that other shit. But if you're ready for a very deep philosophical, religious talk, maybe you can tolerate this one. Guiding moral dilemmas. Hinduism, well, the key, scripture in Hinduism is the Bhagavad Gita. Very easy read, by the way. I would encourage you read it. We open on a battlefield scene where our protagonist Arjuna is faced with killing his own cousins as they have usurped the throne. He is on his chariot with his bow and arrow, and he is facing his family. And he is in despair. He is in apathy. He is asking Krishna, who is his advisor, how do I approach this? How do I spill my own flesh and blood? Right? And this is very analogous to decisions in our life, which are really, really difficult. We're always faced with these moral dilemmas whereby we are conflicted between maybe what is right, maybe what is easy, and maybe doing things selfishly or selflessly, right? And here's what Krishna, God, the self, the soul, says to Arjuna. He says, the immortal soul is more important than the passing world. Is that you are going to discard your body like you discard your clothes every evening. You know, you finish your day, you throw your clothes in that little pile on the floor, and you put on new ones in the morning, right? Or hopefully you put new ones in the morning. Right? This is the premise of reincarnation. Your soul is immutable. It is immortal. The body that you wear is only a fleeting second in the grand scheme of your life. Do your duty. Do the lesson that you were placed here to experience. Right? So this is the Atman. Your real self is never born and never dies. There are some parallels with the Christ principle, those of you of a Judeo-Christian disposition. The self or Christian soul wears the body as a garment. When the garment is old, it casts aside and dons a new one. Sin is the refusal to recognize that you are beyond dualistic nature of life, such as pleasure and pain, and becoming attached to it is Maya, is the matrix, is illusion. The unwise whom attach themselves to Maya are doomed and bound to continual rebirth. What does this mean? It means that when you are faced with a task of identifying with your soul as opposed to identifying with your body, with your mind, and you choose the latter, you are doomed to repeat the lesson again and again and again until you recognize that you are the immortal soul. Take something that is of an addictive nature. Let's say you're addicted to drinking, right? The reason why addiction to drinking is a sin is because you have attached yourself to an illusion. You've attached yourself to pleasure of flesh. You've attached yourself to something which is transient, which is so cheap in its nature that it will blindfold you from the truth of your immortal soul, that you are God the Creator himself. And acknowledging any less than that is a lie and is therefore a sin. You know, actually the derivative of sin means? Sin means missing the mark. It means missing the mark or missing the target. Meaning when you tried to find joy, you settled for pleasure. You settled for something cheap. When you tried to find God, you found God in drink. And and it's so foolish as well, because God's right here, right in front of your nose. And you went for the bottle instead. You could have been liberated by just sitting down and being still, but instead you had to even make the effort to go and try and find God in drink. Self-realization is God realization. Your identity is consistent with divine, not of fleeting and the finite. You're not the fleeting and the finite, you are the infinite. You're the infinite. The wise who keep their minds and hearts in God are destined to unify with the divine. What does that mean? This is difficult. I don't want to sound like I'm sitting here on my ivory tower. I lose this every single day. But because I ground myself in practices that allow me to actualize God every single day as well, I get peeks behind the curtain that I'm moving in the right direction. So the wise who keep their minds and hearts in God are destined to unify with the divine. If you can recognize throughout your day, when you're cleaning your dishes, when you're driving to work, when you're doing your taxes, that you are that, you are the God that you are seeking. And if you can be present with that stillness, with that divinity, with that creative capacity of power, that's what you're looking for. That's what you're really looking for. It's not going to come in the clouds and the bearded man in the clouds. They're not going to say, there's God, here's God. It's right here. It's right in this moment. It's right in this moment. But as long as you attach with, again, the finite, the fleeting, the transient aspects of this world, the 3D realm, the Maya, the matrix, you are doomed to continually rebirth. So how do you keep that feeling? That's the question. And we'll get onto the nothing matters argument, which again I feel is a real null one. How do you keep that stillness? How do you keep close to God? Practices that allow you to detach from the Maya and recognize the soul. They call meditation the greatest austerity. The greatest austerity. Meaning there is no practice that will allow you to recognize God quicker than meditation. I know that can be contentious, so we can maybe have that argument a little bit later. But the idea here is once you close your eyes and you come within, it takes energy to fuel your senses. So it takes energy to fuel your eyes, to fuel your nose, to fuel your taste buds, to fuel, the receptors on your skin to determine temperature and depth and texture. But when you close them, right? When you close them, because the eyes are an extension of your brain, when you close them, what happens is instead of energy moving out this way, you reverse it, you turn it back in on itself, right? And you are coming to recognize the soul, and you're coming to recognize the witness. You can call it the Christian soul, you can call it I call it the Atman. Some people call it the witness in psychology, right? You bring all that attention to developing what Rudolf Steiner called spiritual organs. Organs that allow you to develop the sensory mechanisms to recognize spirit, soul, God, universe. Yeah? Children, you hear this idea that children are very, very spiritual beings is because they haven't been closed off to the idea of a second, a third, a fourth, fifth dimension above them, right? They often can contact maybe people who have left their bodies, personalities, things like that. And that's all because they have their spiritual organs haven't atrophied yet. We lose this ability as we get older because we have to live here. We have to live in this realm, right? And there's tropes in the world that allow us to become too easily attached to the finite, right? Social media, entertainment, pleasure, food, fast food, all that shit. It keeps us attached. And once you're constantly looking at things that are shoved in your face as opposed to the things that are already there, you'll lose the ability to see them. Right, let's talk about nothing matters. This is constantly the argument that I get in relation to, or the nihilist, or the scientist, or the atheist will progenerate or perpetuate, pardon me, in relation to Hinduism. So nihilism or rejection of God leaves you doomed to repeat the same spiritual lessons until you realize God in your own way, right? Moksha can only be achieved by seeing through Maya and reuniting with Brahman. So moksha is unification with God, right? It's the end of the karmic cycle of constant rebirth and reincarnation. What's interesting is this keeps on going forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, right? Until you realize the lesson that you were supposed to learn. Like some of you won't get it. I probably had lifetimes where I didn't get it. And I had to keep repeating that cycle. My particular lesson, or my lesson, I believe, is with love, lust, and pride, right? So I have to constantly recognize that I am the Christian soul, that I am the Atman, I am the Newman. I can't become attached to my identity with Joseph, right? I'm just renting Joseph, right? I'm renting Joseph for this particular lifetime. I'm going to discard him like the clothes I discard every single night, and I'm going to don a new body until I get to a point where I've learned all my lessons and I can reunite with myself. I can reunite with the divine. I can reunite with God. I can achieve moksha. So in relation to nothing matters, everything matters. Everything matters. It matters because even if you don't care now, you're torturing your soul. When you have to keep rebirthing to recognize the lessons that this is all transient, you are doomed to keep repeating them. And that's fine. You can do it. You can smoke weed. You can do drugs. You can be attached to pleasure. That's cool. That's fine. That's just the lesson that you have to learn in this particular lifetime. Because one is going to bring you so much pain and suffering that it's going to be unbearable. You're going to be screaming and screaming and screaming and calling for death. And it's going to be horrendous. And you'll die and you'll be reborn into a similar situation where you have to learn that lesson. And you'll keep screaming and dying again until you learn it. Yeah, it's a difficult image, especially if you have, as a human, you have empathy. But God recognizes that in order for him to understand himself, he has to split himself off from his own divinity and experience himself in order to keep moving forward. That's evil, by the way. That's hell. Is ignorance. Is missing the target. You keep asking yourself the question, why are you in so much pain? Is because you've identified with your own humanity. You've identified too much with your own self. People have such a bad relationship with death, right? Death is like taking off a tight shoe. Death is like taking off a tight shoe. That's what Ram Dass used to say. God bless him. He left his body as well, reunited with the divine. Death is like taking off a tight shoe. Don't mourn those. Mourn the living. Don't mourn the dead. That's a really good way to think about it. It should be a celebration. Leaving your body, reuniting with the divine. But gentlemen, I hope this is my interpretation. I have things that lead me to believe that what I'm experiencing in this lifetime is a consequence of what I know to be true. I believe there's continuity between all religions, and I use terminology that allows me to unify all those religions, because that's essentially it's the same thing. It's the same thing ultimately. Is love each other. We're all ourselves experiencing a different life. In the simplest ways, right? Jesus' fundamental teachings. But I'm noticing this video is getting far too long, and I hope it was valuable. Hope it instilled some contemplation in you. Because you're just me experiencing me. Wonder if you realize it yet. And if you don't, I'll be here waiting. Take care.